Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about Samadhi in Yogananda's autobiography. So Paramahansa Yogananda describes his experiences in Samadhi in states of superconsciousness in his autobiography of a yogi. And he writes thus: "My body became immovably rooted. Breath was drawn out of my lungs as if by some huge magnet. Soul and mind instantly lost their physical bondage and streamed out like a fluid, piercing light from every pore. The flesh was as though dead, yet in my intense awareness I knew that never before had I been fully alive. My sense of identity was no longer narrowly confined to a body, but embraced the circumambient atoms. The whole vicinity lay before me. My ordinary frontal vision was now changed to a vast spherical sight, simultaneously all perceptive." So in Yogananda's account, we hear about pratyahara, internalization, when he talks about being immovably rooted. As well, the breath being drawn out of the lungs is a reference to the tranquil breath. Yogananda also references the consciousness expanding in all directions when he talks about the vast spherical sight. This is an experience of the fifth jhana, which is infinite space, and this normally is the first state of samadhi that one experiences. He continues, "An oceanic joy broke upon calm, endless shores of my soul. The Spirit of God, I realized, is exhaustless bliss. His body is countless tissues of light. A swelling glory within me began to envelope towns, continents, the earth, solar and stellar systems, tenuous nebulae, and floating universes. The entire cosmos, gently luminous, like a city seen afar at night, glimmered within the infinitude of my being." The bliss that Yogananda describes is the sixth jhana, the jhana of infinite consciousness, and is the realization when one is in a state of infinite space and realizes that the infinite space is filled with infinite consciousness. And this is a very blissful feeling that seems to have an ever-new quality, like a pulsating current. And this is seen as one of the pinnacles of attainment in Kriya Yoga. In Yogananda's account of Samadhi in his autobiography, there are some implicit assumptions that are normally glossed over by indiscriminating readers. So the main explanatory model in yoga centers around the ego, the soul, and God. The ego, ahamkara, is seen as a pseudo-soul, a reflection of the soul, but an imperfect reflection of the soul, subject to all sorts of woe. The soul, Atman, is seen as the perfect reflection of spirit, an indivisible part of spirit that is always pure and is beyond the effects of karma. Then we have Brahma, or God, is seen as the ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss, what is called Satchitananda. And so in yoga, one overcomes the ego, ahamkara, to realize the true nature of the soul, the Atman, so that one can unite the Atman with Brahman, or the Param Atman, and in that way experience yoga, true divine union. And so in one's everyday experience and in meditation, these three models are represented. And so the ego is believed to be synonymous with everyday experience, the ups and downs of life. The experience of samadhi, of infinite space, is thought to be part of the nature of the soul's omnipresence. Similarly, the experience of infinite consciousness and this infinite bliss is thought to be part of the nature of God, this ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss, Satchitananda. But there's a thread that ties them all together, and that is identification. So if one identifies with one's bodily everyday experiences, it is said that one is in ego consciousness. If one identifies with the expansion of consciousness, it is said that one is in soul consciousness. If one identifies with the experience of this infinite bliss, it is said that one is in God consciousness. If we look at the Sanskrit term ahamkara, which is normally translated as ego, and read it literally, it means I-making. This is a creation of sense of self from any phenomenal experience. I-making can be in everyday experiences when one identifies with one's everyday experiences. I-making can be in an expansion of consciousness when it identifies with the expansion of consciousness. I-making can be in an experience of infinite bliss when one identifies with the infinite bliss. And so when we look at it in this way, we can see that the I-making is present through all of those experiences if one identifies with those phenomena. And so the idea that identification with an expansion of consciousness is somehow the soul, and identification with the everyday experiences of life is somehow the ego is mistaken. They are all I-making. When one identifies with bliss, it is I-making. When one identifies with expansion, it is I-making. When one is identifying with one's everyday experience, it is I-making. It is all the ego. It is all the concept of self being projected onto phenomenal experiences. So by having an experience of infinite space in meditation, it does not mean that one is realizing the nature of the soul. What it means is one is having an experience of infinite space and identifying with it, therefore bringing in a concept of the self. And the challenge with doing that is that it actually impedes one's progress in meditation. So the challenge is, in meditation, despite the fact that one may be able to get into exalted states of consciousness, samadhi and so on, if one continues to identify with those states, consequently one is not able to overcome the ignorance about that. One will always have a misperception of reality when one identifies with any state of awareness, be it everyday consciousness, expansion, or bliss. One is unable to see the true nature of that state. Number one, that they are impermanent. They are subject to change. Number two, that they cannot provide us lasting satisfaction. And number three, that they cannot be taken as a self. And so this misperception of the nature of reality is due to the craving and clinging of existence in whatever form, from the coarsest experiences of everyday life to the highest states of bliss. But if one can let go of the identification with any of these states, one can realize their true nature and progress naturally in meditation. If one can perceive the phenomena in meditation themselves without adding in the I-making, one can realize that meditation itself is an impersonal process. So for example, if one is in Paravasta, the after-effect poised state of Kriya, after having done Kriya Pranayama and associated practices, and one experiences a feeling of loving kindness, one can just be aware that there is loving kindness without adding the I-making into it. That there is loving kindness, not I am experiencing loving kindness, but there is loving kindness. Similarly, in the fifth jhana, as one is experiencing a state of infinite space, one can be aware that space is infinite, stripping out the I-making from that. Not that one is expanding in all directions, but that space is infinite. One strips out the sense of the ego and experiences the state as it truly is. Similarly, in the sixth jhana, infinite consciousness, if one is aware that consciousness is infinite and is not preoccupied with merging the soul and God and having an experience from the ego perspective of this infinite bliss, one just sees things as they are, that consciousness is infinite, one will have that natural experience and be able to progress beyond it. This strips out the I-making, the false ego concept that pervades poor practice. And this leads to true realization rather than spiritual stagnation. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.